Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder when I drop the kids off at school and deliver an episode to you while I walk home. I'm Brendan Riley. Good morning, listeners. It is Wednesday, May 23rd, and I'm speaking to you from a lovely, sunny Chicagoland morning. The sun is out, the cars are buzzing around, the children are nestled safely in the line outside of school, and I am walking home in the nice weather. So this morning, I thought that I would talk to you about opacity in games. Opacity, I don't mean the ability to see through things. I guess I could do an episode on Gloom or Mystic Veil, where you can see through the cards, but that's not really what I'm talking about here. Instead, I'm interested in how easily a game makes itself evident to you as to what it's doing. So how clearly can you see the kind of mechanisms at work in the game and the path to victory? So, a very simple game, something like Candyland or whatever. Actually, Candyland isn't really a game at all because you have no choices at all. You just draw a card and move a thing. And it's literally fine for children who want to learn how to play a game. But that is the extent of what's going on in Candyland. There's no choices to be made. So what if we think about something a little bit more succinct but straightforward? So something like Munchkin. Munchkin, I would say, is a relatively transparent game in that it's the thing you're trying to do, get yourself to level 10, is evident, and the ways that you do that are obvious. You build up equipment, you fight monsters that you can easily beat, you play the negative cards that you get on your opponents to try to stop them from beating the monsters that they encounter and beating you to that 10th point. So it's fairly straightforward in that way. And admittedly, there are a lot of games that you could boil down that way. I would say Munchkin is particularly good that way because while there are some strategies about when to hold back and when to spend particular cards, in general, there's not a ton of strategy to it except stay in second place as long as you can because everybody attacks the leader. Instead, there are some games that, on the other side of things, games that are very opaque, that make themselves difficult to understand. So some of the more obscure point salad type games, I feel like, are this way because, one, the objective is kind of fuzzy, right? So, like I said, in the example Munchkin, your objective is get to 10 points. Or, last week I talked about Star Wars Rebellion a bit. Your objective in Star Wars Rebellion, if you're the Empire, blow up the planet where the Rebel base is. If you're the Rebels, survive long enough and accomplish enough missions to make the reputation and the timer tokens meet on that timer board. That's a little obscure, but it's not that once you're playing, you understand what it is. So for me, the first level of transparency needs to be, can you figure out what you're supposed to do to win? Like, what is the goal? And this is actually one of the places where I think that Euro games, if poorly explained, don't lend themselves to that very well. Right? I think about 3 Euro games that I have and have played a little. Agricola, which I've played the most of these 3. Aquasphere, which I've played a few times. And then Tzolk'in, the Mayan calendar, which I played once in person and I'm halfway through a game of it online. These 3 games, they're all solidly Euros. All 3 of them, or 2 of them anyway, might be construed as point salad games. Tzolk'in doesn't seem to have victory points the way the other games do. Instead, it's got these worship tracks, which seem to... Honestly, I don't even know what the win condition is on Tzolk'in. I don't know what you're supposed to do to win. Which admittedly might be poor rules comprehension on my part. But I feel like most games should make evident to the player what you're supposed to do to win. And games where get the most points is the answer to the question of what do you do to win already present a level of obscurity that makes it difficult to understand them, because they are not explaining what you have to do to get to those points, right? So like in baseball, you could say get the most runs to win, but the immediate next question is, well, how do you get runs? You hit the ball with the bat, you run around the bases. And there's obviously a lot more to it than that, but or in soccer, score the most points to win. Well, how do you score points, right? Having to ask again immediately obscures the victory a little bit. And it occurs to me that this might be one place where game designers can think about, if they're making a game, even if the game kind of operates on points, is there a way that you can make the points a little more obscured in favor of a more solid win objective? I would say a lot of people who play Euros enjoy the idea of points as the measure for victory, because then you can have the gloried and fabled multiple paths to victory, right? If there are points everywhere in the game and you can do all sorts of different things to get points, then it becomes a matter of who's the most efficient at getting points and who gathers the most, who learns to run this system the best. That seems to be the main idea within a Euro game, is trying to figure out who can run the system the best. So as I think about whether a game is obscure or not, one of the first things that comes to mind, as opposed to transparent, is how obvious is the win condition. And so part two of that is, how obvious is it to get to that win condition? So use Tzolk'in as my example again. Like I said, I don't even really understand what you do to win, or to have the most whatever it is when the win comes around. But on top of that, I understand the mechanism of putting your worker on and taking off and get the reward that's there. But I haven't yet really figured out why I would do that or what I'm doing it for. You know, like Agricola is another one. The first time you play it, you're just trying to figure out how to do stuff. And Agricola has that really solid, feed your people mechanism. And so part of what you're doing with the first playthrough of Agricola is making sure you have enough food to feed your people each time. And then the second time you play it, you know you have to do that, but then you also have to think about these other things. And so, as you play Agricola, you come to realize, oh, okay, I get penalized for everything I don't do. That to have the best working farm, I at least need to do everything a little bit, or be willing to take those penalties for not doing it. And then as a secondary part, then I want to figure out, well, what's my strategy for getting the most points? Okay, look, if I get up to this many sheep, that maxes out the sheep points. So I want to think about how to do that. And same with the cows, and same with the pigs. So like as you play those games a few more, then you start to realize that the game is in figuring out the most efficient way to get your points. Then of course on top of that, there are the occupation cards and the minor improvement cards, which are what make Agricola interesting. Otherwise it would be basically the same game over and over again. But having these different improvements and occupations means that you benefit differently from using different systems, and that's where the game really shines. So I thought of all this because last night I played one of my favorite games again. I played Anachrony, which, just by the way, if you're a listener who has played Anachrony a number of times, what's your average playtime on that for 4 people? I'm curious, because for one, I don't know if I've ever played it with 4 people who already know how to play it. It's almost always at least one new person. Last night it was 2 new people, both of whom had read the rules ahead of time and watched the videos, so they came in knowing how to play, but it still was time consuming. And it was 3 hours and 11 minutes for that game. And I'm just curious, it seems like every game of Anachrony I play runs at least 3 hours, sometimes longer. And I'm curious, for 4 people, what is your usual playtime on that game? But so Anachrony is one of those ones that I find interesting because, again, you're winning by points, and it's got, like Agricola, a big chart of things and what you score for. And in the end, it's all about efficiency and how many points can you get, right? I spent my last couple turns really trying to figure out how to maximize my actions to get the most points, making trade-offs between like, oh, if I do this, that will get rid of this -3 thing, but if I do this over here, I can get a +6, so that's better than +6 is better than getting rid of the -3. And I only have one action here. Do I do this or that? And that sort of thing. And that is ultimately what a lot of these games end up with in the last turns. But it's interesting to think about the path that you take to get there when you're starting out with something like Anachrony, where they have different player boards. So when you play, you have a different, a differing experience or different outcome each time. The experience of the play is different because you're motivated to do different things depending on who you drew. For instance, I was the Path of Salvation, and one of my bonuses, or one of the main things I'm supposed to do then is do time travel. And I get a bonus. I can do my evacuation only if I have if I have 2 paradoxes in play. So the goal of my game early on was to just do the time travel action. I think I did 2 resources every single round, the whole game. Maybe I did 1 once. But then I bought 2 time travel devices, and I used them both over and over again. So I got up to the maximum points in time travel, which for that game, or for my board, it was 20 points. Most of the other people maxed out at like 12 or 14. So they couldn't get as many points as I could from time travel. Of course, they got other benefits as well, and that's what makes Anachrony interesting, is that the boards are wildly different. But the challenge of the game is that you have to recognize the different point systems clearly enough that when you sit down to start and you see, oh, my board rewards me for this, you almost have to decide right from the beginning what direction you're going in. Which thing are you aiming at? How are you aiming to succeed in terms of getting points? And sort of developing those metrics is a key part of the game. I mean, for instance, I got 17 points. So I won by 13 points. I got 17 points from a couple different things. One, because I already knew I was going for the time travel thing, then there was a super project that gave you an extra point for every time travel unit you moved. So I aimed for that right away. That also helped because one of the bonuses was the most super projects built. So by doing that, I was upping my competitiveness on 2 of those tracks. Similarly, toward the end of the game, I recognized that nobody else had the means to build another super project right at the end, and I did. So I pursued the super project that gave me a little flexibility and some points at the end. But that also put me into the realm of 2 super projects, which was the same as anybody else, or the next leader, and thus I got points for that as well. I was able to recognize early on that was going to be useful for me because I knew from the beginning what strategy I was taking to maximize my points. Right? Other players, so I was the most experienced player at the game. The next most experienced, it was his 2nd or 3rd game, and there were 2 people who it was their 1st game. This was my 5th or 6th game of Anachrony, maybe 6th. And so there's a certain level at which I won because I've played the system more, and so I'm more able to see through its opacity. It's more transparent to me. But that's one of the things I'm going to be looking at as I continue to work on game development and as I continue to play more games, is looking at how opaque does the game make the path to victory, and how does that affect our sense of the game's weight and the game's quality. I'm interested to know from you, what's the most opaque game you've played? What's the most transparent? What are your thoughts on this matter? Please let me know. I'm in Guild 3269 and Boardgame Geek, and I would love for you to pop by and say hello. Otherwise, Brendan at Rattlebox Games or Rattlebox Games on Twitter will get a hold of me as well. Thanks for joining me on this Sunday, Wednesday morning, although you're not listening to it on a Wednesday morning, I don't think. But I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Have a good one.
Brought to you by
Rattlebox Games.